connection, engagement, rigor, success. Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Coaching You Through All Things Education. And you can find me right here on Tuesdays at noon. I'm your host, Ann Labangana Clay of ANC Unlimited. And we take the stress out of education. I am a passionate educator who has spent the past 26 years teaching and coaching students of all ages, parents, other educators, and the public. Each week, we will unpack relevant topics in education together. And when I'm not podcasting, stop by our website, acunlimited.org, for a free consultation on effective strategies for workplace burnout. We also provide 3 levels of interview coaching and custom design workshops made just for you. You can find me on LinkedIn at Ann Labangana Clay, on our company Facebook page, ANC Unlimited, and on Twitter at AnnHC_champ for all. Check our story notes for our other social media details. Have an episode suggestion? Send it to coachingallthingsedu@gmail.com. Now let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of Coaching You Through All Things Education podcast with our special guest, Dr. Will Deyamport III. He wears many hats, which are inclusive of being an instructional technologist in Mississippi, an author and publisher of the documentary The Edupreneur, featured on Forbes.com. He is a podcast host of The Dr. Will Show and a content creator for school districts, companies, and educators alike. Dr. Will, we're going to jump right in. I have a couple of questions for you that I've combined together. Can you tell us a bit about what is the term edupreneur, a little bit about yourself, and how can we get started as an edupreneur based on your successes?
I did not, of course, coin the term edupreneur. It has been around and I have seen it used by so many people, and mostly from people who don't work in education. And normally for them, I've seen the term used as someone who is creating a business built on education and educating a particular niche client base. And for me, being an educator and coming from an education background, when I think of the term edupreneur, I am thinking of that educator who has that entrepreneurial mindset, that educator who is looking to make a greater impact outside of the confines of their classroom, their school district, their organization, their university. I'm thinking of that individual who is looking to monetize their skills and their talents, their knowledge set, in the way in which they are looking to make a transformation in the lives of the clients, the people they serve, versus the transaction of, here's my course for your money, or I will show up and speak for your money. So it's not about the transaction, it's about the transformation that you are entering this space with the same intent you became an educator in the first place. And that is to make that lasting impact on the lives of the people you serve, be they students. In terms of what we think of the classical term student, people in K through 12, or we're talking about a university setting or a community setting, a nonprofit organization, etc. I have been an instructional technologist for the past 8 years, and in that role, my job has been to teach teachers how to use a variety of technologies to reimagine the learning experience of their students. Currently, my mindset as we are moving and embracing this digital world that we're living in, my goal is to work with teachers in leveraging technologies in ways in which the classroom is no longer a stagnant building, where the classroom is no longer defined by four walls, where the classroom is no longer a silo experience, but something that is very dynamic, something that is mobile, something that is personalized, and something where students are able to take technology and create new learning experiences that extend their learning in ways pencil and paper does not. In addition to doing that work, I am also a digital strategist, an educational consultant, where I go to different schools and deliver trainings for schools. I do keynote addresses. I do webinars for organizations and webinars for universities. I also write for education entities, and I hope to begin to offer courses and podcasts for different education companies or organizations. Honestly, I did not know that I had the right idea for an entrepreneur business. I never went into it with the intent to become an entrepreneur. I had spent like literally several years, putting in the groundwork of presenting at conferences, uh, you know, talking to people, creating content, blogging, getting into these conversations and Twitter chats, and really sort of making myself known to a myriad of people. And for example, in my state, there are conferences like Making Connections, and the Dr. Francis Carnes Center has a conference. MECA, which is our state educator technology conference. MAGC, which is the gifted educator conference. I've presented at all of them, and I had done that for several years, building a reputation for myself. And I have been doing the work as well in terms of, my professional experience being an instructional technologist with a K through 12 school district. And I remember actually being at MAGC and a gifted coordinator approached me and asked me, what are your rates to do this as a consultant? And it had never dawned on me because I had never thought of myself as doing this for a business. So I called up Eric Schenniger. I like to call him, my Yoda. And he gave me sort of a breakdown of what my bottom line costs need to be and how to approach this. He and I, again, have spoken, other times since then. In terms of him helping me to the game of how to approach this and structure what I am doing. And I just sort of fell into it because though nothing transpired from that conversation from MAGC, I was at Mecca, and an assistant superintendent from another school district in the state approached me sort of the same way. And he asked me, well, is this something that you do? And I was like, yeah, like for my job, outside of my job. And he said, outside of my job. Yeah. And he later came to a session of mine. And I sort of jokingly, asked, well, is this a job interview? And he said, yes. And after my session, he said, I will get back in touch with you. Like, you'll be hearing from me. And I don't know if it was a week or 2 weeks, but he did call me. And we talked through what we wanted and what he wanted. And I actually did a day of Google training with his CTE teachers. And about 30 days later, I got my first consulting check. And I was literally like, I got almost what I make in a month, give or take $300 or so. I got that in one day. And I was hooked, right? I knew that this was something that I wanted to be doing in terms of, getting out there and bringing in that extra income. At that point, I didn't have an idea of how to approach it as a business and how I would make it into a business. I just knew that I had a great time and I wanted to make more money. Like, I was hooked.
Our next question is, how did you know when you had the right idea?
The mistakes that I made that I wish, well, I don't want to say I wish I had avoided, because you always learn from every experience. So you should learn from every experience that you have encountered, right? And what I would say is the fact that I did not approach it as a business, right? So I did not sit down and, clearly define the way that I was going to help people. I did not clearly define what my business would be, what it is, the services that I would offer, how I would deliver those services. I did not come up with a content strategy around it. There was a lot of things that I've learned since then I didn't do, simply because I kind of, like I said, I fell into it with that first check. And then when the second gig came around again, it was someone who called me, right, to do a keynote with my wife at this gifted conference and to do a couple of sessions. And it wasn't, again, anything that I did. It wasn't anything that we put in place to define what the business would be. It just sort of came out of nowhere. And that is what I think, this is what I know you need to do, is once you have the idea, even if your first gig comes out of nowhere, and I think it happens to a lot of people, where if you're putting in the work and you're presenting at conferences and you have a blog, you have a vlog, you're doing these tutorials on YouTube, you are doing Twitter chats, at some point in time, someone is going to approach you with your first gig. And it's going to, I'm assuming this is going to come, it's going to feel like this is coming out of nowhere. I didn't plan to do it. And once that happens, it's okay to not think about your business and building a business and doing that, getting that gig out of the way. But once you're done, that's when you really need to start thinking about building a business with systems and other things, so that you can bring in consistent income and have a workflow around what you are actually doing. Just like your classroom. The best teachers can only wing it when they already have a system in place, right? You don't want to be that teacher who you don't have lesson plans, you don't have lessons planned, you don't have a routine for classroom management, you don't have a routine and workflow for how your classroom is going to start and finish. And that's the same thing with your business. You have to look at it with that same lens.
Let's take a brief break to digest, and we'll be right back with more of Dr. Will Deyamport III. Now, a word from our sponsor. Want to start your own podcast? Start with Anchor FM. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it is absolutely free. They also have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor FM will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple, and many more podcast apps. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. So, if you're interested, please download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Dr. Will, what are some mistakes you wish you could have avoided?
You have to define your niche, right? So earlier I spoke about how you need to be clear in defining the way you want to help people. And this is where we're talking about, and I got this from Shantavia Johnson, but you want to look at the power of one. And you want to start out as one way of doing this. And then from that, sort of begin to branch out. So are you going to be a consultant where you come in and deliver specific trainings to school districts? Are you going to be a content creator where you actually develop curriculum that schools can license and purchase for your use, or you can work with school districts to co-create and create curriculum, either with departmental teams or at the district level that they will then be able to use? Will you either have a TPT store where you sell lessons and units, or you sell tutorials on, you could be, for example, you could be a math teacher and you have these great tutorials on, how to graph or how to work out quadratic equations, things of that nature. You can sell those on TPT, or you can sell that, via your own website. Are you going to be an author slash, keynote speaker? Are you going to design courses that you may be able to sell directly to school districts, or you can sell those courses directly to teachers? Are you going to be a writer for websites like Edutopia or district administration or what have you? And so you have to figure out that one thing you're going to sort of build your business around first, niche down your idea, understanding that you need to be relevant to a small group of people who will invest in your success. Understand that you can't get caught up in social media metrics, right? There are people, and I look, it happens to me where, you write a blog post for a company and you want to find out, hey, are people reading my articles? Or you have a YouTube channel and you keep looking at your views, or you have a podcast, keep looking at your downloads. And I'm not saying that you should ignore them, but you should not become obsessed over them, because you need to do the work of becoming profitable over popular. Meaning, if you're going to be counting anything, count your invoices and not your likes, because there are plenty of people who are influencers who can have 1 million followers, but if they came out with a t-shirt, they couldn't sell 1 million t-shirts. They couldn't sell 1,000 t-shirts. So it really isn't about you amassing this huge social media presence if your business isn't, profitable, right? So that's what you want to be thinking about. That's what you want to be working on. You also want to be working from your zone of genius. And what I mean by that is, remember, in addition to clearly defining how you are going to help your people, being relevant to a smaller group of people, that comes in terms of really niching down. And niching down is being like really targeted. And so for me, my niche that I am building our business around, because I work with my wife, it is about digital transformation. Within that, we're talking about online learning, blended learning. that will be the only two things that, in terms of my business, you are going to see me concentrate on. Now, that doesn't mean I won't, again, I have my documentary, I have a sequel coming out. I also will, earlier as I mentioned, how do you deliver? Well, I deliver webinars for different companies. And one of those companies is CK12. I've done webinars for them on how to become a podcaster, as well as how do you podcast in your classroom. And those will be sort of ancillary things that you will hear me write about, that you'll hear me talk about, that you'll hear me present about. But the bread and butter, that power of one, in which our business is built around, in which we will put the work in which we are seeking, actively seeking to be known for and paid for, will be everything. How do you teach online? How do you design, blended learning lessons that are impactful? Assessment. How do you create synchronous learning experiences with your students? So those are the things that our business will be about. So you have to think about these things, plan for these things, work on these things, and educate yourself. And there's this book called Niching Down. I will get Anna the information to put in the show notes for it. On YouTube, there's all sorts of people. I love listening to Sarah Fortuné. I love her videos. I love listening to Earn Your Leisure. And when I check out their podcasts, it's because their podcast is always about business, right? It's always about business and truth told, Black business, and how can you be successful? How can you be profitable?
What are some tips you have for our listeners about how to grow their business?
And so, in growing your business, that is what you need to be looking at, right? You also have to sort of own your awesome. Figure out what makes you different. And what I mean by that is, don't try to be, it's cliche, I guess, to say don't be like anyone else, but it's about you owning everything about you, and including your mess. My mess, and this is the truth, I am lazy. Now, I'm not lazy about everything, but I am lazy about stuff that I do not want to do. I'm also not a very complicated individual. I always like to make things very simple, very to the point, very concise. If you read my writing, you'll see that in my writing. If you ever watch me train teachers, you'll see it in the way that I train teachers. If you ever hear me speak, that's what you will hear from me. I don't get very fluffy with how I speak. my turn of phrases, the words that I use. I'm just a very easy, non-complicated, simple, to the point individual, and real lazy. I like to tell people that I'm a lazy minimalist, and my wife will just tell you that I am lazy. And I own that. And in owning that, I know that when I am thinking about what I am going to do, how I'm going to work with people, how I present myself, it is always about me understanding what ways I know that I can show up and provide value. If I know this route is going to take a certain amount of work, and work that I don't want to do, or things that I won't want to do, I avoid that. And this may be different, and it may even sound crazy in terms of business practices, but when let's give the example of my podcast. Some people are audiophiles and they love audio, and they're going to edit that podcast down to the point to where it is a pristine recording. They're going to take out the ahs. They're going to take out the pauses. They're going to put in these cute bumpers and all of these things. They are going to make that podcast sound like it came out of a $5 million studio. That's not how I roll. For me, it's about being consistent in the work that I do. So unless there is something happens during the interview and the person stops and says, "Hey, can I edit this? Can we edit this out?" Or there's noise on their end, there is buffering because of Wi-Fi. My podcast never gets edited. So I take the recording as it is, and it gets uploaded and it's out there. When I have those issues, instead of me editing those get sent out to a professional audio editor. Right. And so this is where I say, own what you do well, right? Own your art, own your awesome, and farm out, hire out, contract out those things where you are not. That is, yeah, that's what you should be doing. You should not try to take on everything and take on things that you do not do well, and quite honestly don't want to do anyway. And then you got to figure out what makes you different from other people. I did not come into this education business as a traditional teacher. My wife always wanted to be a teacher. She told me how she used to do school with her younger brother. And my wife went through an education program. She did student teaching. She took teacher exams. And my wife right now is a heck of a teacher. I am so proud of her. She's such a professional. She knows her area very, very well. And she is a rock star. I, on the other hand, did none of those things. I fell into education, as I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned this. I fell into education. I originally went to school to become a filmmaker. And then I graduated from college with my degree in film, and I started working with young people, and I was hooked. And youth development was my path. My first real professional job, where I wore suits and had business cards in my own office, was running a college and career program in which I had different people come in and speak to students about different topics, whether it be how to tie a tie, how to write a college essay, people who would come in and talk about the difference between a college and university, who would talk to students about the whole college planning process. What does that look like? What does a university look like? And we would take kids on college tours, and I would create these cultural event nights where it'd be sort of like a potluck where, the students that I work with, they were very multicultural, Haitian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Colombian, German, Scottish, what have you. And each kid would bring in, well, some kids were like, I'm bringing, paper cups, plates, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly they would bring in food from that their parents would cook from their cultural home. And we would have just a night where all of the students and their parents and their families could come together, and we all just celebrate the deliciousness of the human family. And we even had, like the second time we threw it, someone from a university who came in, and we would have, parents kind of go into the room and they would speak to them about the college planning process. And then, of course, we took kids on college tours. So that was my first foray into education. I have a degree in child and family studies, and that has influenced me with how I actually teach teachers. Because when I approach my way in teaching teachers, is about changing of behavior far more than it is click this button, click that button. So figure out what makes you different. Look at how you approach the way you teach, how you approach your students, how you think about your students, how you were educated yourself, what was your family background. Whatever makes you different, put all of that into the work that you're doing. Don't run away from it. Don't shy away from it, but figure out a way how that has impacted your life and put that into what you're doing.
Let's take another brief break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Will Deyamport III.
Are you ready to share your voice, your vision, and your mission? Are you ready to turn your passion into a profit? Then you need to start a podcast today. Hello, I'm Antoinette Blake, the CEO of A. Blake Enterprises Social Media Marketing and Consulting. And I invite you to send an email to info@ablakeenterprises.com to schedule a 30-minute complimentary discovery call so that we can talk about what it is that you want to share with the world. What is the legacy that you want to leave with your voice? You can also register for a podcasting coaching session for a one-time investment of $159. You'll be able to start your own podcast, turning that passion into a profit. Again, send an email to me at info@ablakeenterprises.com. So using your voice, you can literally change someone's life.
We're back with Dr. Will Deyamport III. Dr. Will, your additional advice for us to grow our business is
you want to create content, right? So you want to create content that offers your customers value. So whether that is creating a podcast, a YouTube channel, or a blog where you actually talk about classroom practices or anything that is related to your business, but you offer free, actionable content that people can turn around and use in their classrooms, whether that be in lesson plans, whether that be actual lessons where you give them all the materials and everything they need to just plug and play and keep it moving. You also want to offer webinars and ways in which you can sort of directly interact with your community. And I understand that if you're going to be someone who's presenting to school districts, to teachers at school districts, when I think of you delivering webinars, for example, you're going to be delivering these webinars to the people that you have built your community around. So if you're a teacher who Instagram is your joint, then you're going to announce to your followers on Instagram or the people you are engaging with and building community, fellowshipping with, or LinkedIn, on Twitter, you're going to announce that you're going to be doing a webinar. You're also going to be doing that on your website as well. And then in that webinar, you're going to record it. You're going to, do a Q&A, all of those things, free content. Because once you are doing that, you are going to get the eye of someone, some principal, some superintendent, some instructional technologist, some teacher that is going to talk to someone to get you into their building. You want, and along with doing that, and this is something that I need to do, you want to get a mailing list. And one of the reasons you want to get a mailing list is the same reason you want to have your own website, is because none of us own Twitter. None of us own LinkedIn. None of us own Instagram. And if one of those sites that we have spent years and years cultivating an audience, building that know, like, and trust factor, if it closes, where do people find you? Where do you go? And if you don't have your website that people know of, that people can travel to, where people can go and get those resources and be able to stay in contact with you, then you've lost. Because you built your business, you built your brand, you built your reputation around a foundation, around a shaken foundation, because neither of us actually own those social sites. So I have my podcast in which I deliver content. Now, my podcast has absolutely nothing to do with my first business. It does have everything to do with my second business in terms of my documentaries. But my first business, it is not related at all. But I do have a podcast. I do have a site. And yes, I share my podcast on LinkedIn. I share my podcast on Twitter, and occasionally I use Instagram. Instagram is in my my flavor, like it is for other people. But I do know that if Twitter closed my account tomorrow, people will still know where to find my podcast.
This last question is trending on our show and is one of my favorites. If you could have your own billboard with anything written on it, what legacy message would you write on it and why?
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. The billboard question. What legacy message would I want on it and why? And I'm going to say for question number 6, my answer would be do the work at getting better at being yourself. I did not create this concept. It's not original to me. I heard this from, I can't even think of this guy's name right now. He used to be a co-host a show. It was a podcast, then became a show on ESPN2 called His and Hers with Jamel Hill. Michael Smith. And I heard him, I don't know if I heard him talking about it, or I think I heard him talking about it, but he said the best career advice he ever got was you have to do the work at getting better at being yourself. And that is what I think I would hope my legacy would be, because life is too short for any of us to try to be someone else. It's exhausting. You know, when you work for a school district, when you work for a company, an organization in which you feel like you have to walk on eggshells, that you have to dress a certain way, you have to speak a certain way, you have to be a certain way in order for you to fit in order for you to be seen as a part of the crew, in order for you to be successful in that company, to move up in the ranks. When you got to put on a show, that is exhausting. I have worked at a university at a division in which I literally felt that way, that I couldn't be myself, that when I would say certain things, you would hear the ooh, the ah, the whatever.
Right.
You have to be yourself.
Gotta be.
You have to be comfortable with yourself. Now, listen, people, there is decorum, right? There is decorum at work. There are things you have to do so that are professional. So I'm not saying, go outside of the bounds of professionalism. What I am saying is you need to be in an environment in which you feel comfortable, where you feel that you can be yourself, that you can show up as yourself, and that being yourself will allow you to be successful. And in that, this is for me saying, is you have to do the work of getting better at being yourself, because all of us are born with specific gifts and talents, and it is up to you to recognize those gifts and talents, and it is up to you to do the work of fine-tuning those gifts and talents, leveraging those gifts and talents, and getting better at those gifts and talents.
Yes.
I am a connector, right? I love people. I am a connector. And that is how I think that's part it made me successful at my job. Not only when you see it as a podcaster, but you even see how when I speak to people, you see how I build relationships with the teachers that I work with, and how I approach everything that I do. It's about, how can we connect, get to know each other, and just really have a good experience.
Thanks a million, Dr. Will, for sharing your wisdom as well as tips that we could use right away towards our goals as entrepreneurs. Have an awesome day.
Thank you, Anna, for the opportunity to be a part of your podcast.
Well, that concludes another episode of Coaching You Through All Things Education podcast. As Confucius states, those who develop the ability to continuously acquire new and better forms of knowledge that they can apply to their work and to their lives will be the movers and shakers in our society for the indefinite future. Again, you can find me on LinkedIn or on our company Facebook page, A&C Unlimited. And please take a moment to visit our website at acunlimited.org for that free consultation. Until next time, stay stress-free and be well.